Mother, forgive me. Those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame. Mongrel intruder, that tarnished it seemeth. O lightless creature, embrace thine oblivion, as shall I.
Something I've always loved about Elden Ring is how it manages to keep the souls of its bosses alive through their remembrances. Some of my fondest memories of the game have been cosplaying as my favorite bosses, and yet there was one thing that always bothered me, and it's that you'd have to start an entire new game cycle to use the weapons you gain from those remembrances against the bosses who dropped them. It's for this reason that in today's video, I'm going to be beating Elden Ring's DLC whilst only using the boss's own weapons against them, an Uno reverse card, if you will. This would of course be impossible in base New Game, but by using certain nefarious means, I can gift myself all the weapons I need. I'll also be rating the weapons on a scale of 1 to 10 on how effective they are at beating their own boss. To add a bit of spiciness into the matter, I'm going to spin this randomizer wheel to decide the order of the bosses I fight. So let's do a little spin-a-riddle-doo, and bing bang boom, it's Romina. Yikes. Aside from Radahn, she is as far away as possible for me. No matter, as traveling to her will certainly open up a large portion of the map. We of course take the back route through the Fort of Reprimand to ensure we don't have to find Rellana yet, and arrive in Scadueltus. Yowza, this game looks real good. A short trip later, through Bonnie Village, we head towards the mighty Black Keep, but making sure we stop off at the creepy finger man on the way, so that we can get the questline started for Metyr, cause I'm all about that efficiency. Through the Black Keep across the bridge towards the ancient ruins of Ra, where I can make a beeline straight for Romina. But of course, I've got to make a quick pit stop along the way in this sneaky little cave to pick up my favorite talisman in the game, the Talisman of All Crucibles. The only talisman I'll be using consistently across all bosses, and the rest I will switch up depending on what weapon I'm using. Okay, so the Pole Blade of the Bud is the perfect weapon for us to talk about how this can get interesting. Most of the bosses are resistant to their own weapons, go figure, which means some of them will be quite atrocious at beating themselves. The only distinguishing factor about the Pole Blade of the Bud is the rot buildup it provides, and given that Romina is immune, yikes. There's no doubt it certainly makes for a visually appealing fight, and there is a great window to use Romina's purification every time she does the ball up centipede triple whip supreme attack. But other than that, this weapon kinda sucks against Romina. I do enjoy its unique double swipe charged heavy attack, but it's still a little bit too slow for my liking, so it doesn't really have anything going for it. Remember, this video is about rating the weapon's performance against their respective bosses and not about how good they are in general. Pole Blade of the Bud, you unfortunately suck ass, and I have no choice but to give you a measly 4 out of 10. Despite this video's focus being mainly on the weapons, the spells that bosses use are certainly not off limits. But given that the only purpose of rotten butterflies is to proc rot, there was literally no point in using it for this fight. I do really like this fight though, so prolonging it by using a suboptimal weapon has never really been a problem for me. But of course, it took way too long, so just enjoy the rest of the best bits. Up next, we have my main girl, Rellana, the Twin Moon Knight, which means we get to use her recently buffed up Twin Blades. Hell yeah. This one was for sure the one I was most excited for, as Rellana is my favorite boss, and I also love her Twin Blades. First things first, we travel back to Rellana's... Fuck man, dude, these names always confuse me. We go back to her sister for a bit of a respec into enough strength, dex, and faith to wield the weapon, and then dump an absolute truckload of levels into intelligence, so that we can use Rellana's Twin Moons. And conveniently along the way, we can pick up the recently buffed Rellana's cameo. This is actually kinda broken now, as a 45% damage increase to your stanced weapon skills is pretty ridiculous. But without further ado, let's see how the Twin Blades fare against their own. So, I've got a lot to say about the Twin Blades. They're really quite brilliant at the moment, and one of the most enjoyable weapons to use in the game. But how good are they against Rellana herself? Well, I would say they're slightly above average. The speed of the blades is quite useful, as Rellana has very little downtime, and I particularly enjoy the backstep cross-swipe attack, as it feels really clean. I found that the most reliable way to use them was to use uncharged heavies for the most part and charged ones where possible. I also unequipped most of her armor, as I really prefer a light roll for Rellana, and I feel like it improves your ability to avoid damage from her by tenfold. As for Rellana's Twin Moons, well, there is a very special use case for them in this fight, but you'll see soon enough. I'm gonna go with a solid 7 out of 10 overall for the Twin Blades. Might have been a little bit higher if she didn't have a strong resistance to magic damage. Oh well, but for now, enjoy Rellana getting a taste of her own medicine. Now that is what I like to call poetic justice. Okay, back to the spin. Oh boy, it's Big Daddy Hog Rider. Luckily, this isn't a problem, as we'd already traveled to the Black Keep for Romina. Of course, we first head over to Rellana and pretty much dump every single stat point we have into strength. If you didn't know this, the Sword Lance scales incredibly well with strength and makes for an absolute railgun of a weapon. Also, side note, my character was around level 160 and Scatter level 8 to 12 for all the bosses. Okay, enough waffling. Back to the Black Keep we go, where I'll waste time messing around with the camera angles, then around the outside area and down to the lands below. If you still hate Commander Gaius, try this fight with and without the Talisman of all Crucibles, because my goodness, it makes a gigantic difference. The Sword Lance is unironically the perfect weapon to fight Gaius with. The sheer DPS you can output just by spamming R1 with this thing is insane. Not to mention, it's great at chasing Gaius when he runs away. As for spinning Gravity Thrust, there's a pretty good window to use it right here, where the boss swings his head, as this attack can usually be jumped. I wouldn't recommend doing the follow-up Gravity Thrust, as you have a pretty good chance of getting hit. And in my eyes, a damage window is only a good one if you can perform it without getting hit yourself. So, what's the verdict? Well, the Sword Lance straight up dominated this man, and it made for the shortest fight of the run by far. It really is a fantastic weapon, and I think the only reason people don't use it more is because it doesn't look as flashy as the other boss weapons, like the Impaler's Spear or Rellana's Twin Blades. The Sword Lance is already a contender for the best boss Uno reverse weapon, and earns itself an easy 9 out of 10. I would have probably given it a 10 if I managed to find a way to get off the second part of spinning Gravity Thrust, but I couldn't quite make it work, unfortunately.
Narca. A curse upon thee.
Meh, 6 out of 10. Don't get me wrong, the Impaler's spear is really stylish, and the way I staggered him midair with his own throwing weapon made me quite moist. But fire damage against Messmer is just not it, and there's pretty much zero chance of getting off the entire Messmer's assault without getting hit yourself. But let's spin that wheel once more, shall we? Oh, spicy. Looks like it's time for Midra and his great sword of damnation.
Of your...
This guy just can't catch a break, can he? Impaled once again by his damnation. Poor bloke. This greatsword is, it's pretty good. It has a very efficient and fast-charged heavy poking attack that is pretty reliable, and I used it as much as possible. The skill, Golden Crux, does immense damage and trivializes any NPC encounter, however, it's quite useless in this fight. You can certainly use it, but you are almost guaranteed to take a couple of hits and most likely die whilst doing it. The hyper armor actually works against you here because you get so much of it that you just keep getting hit and you can't exit the animation. Another thing I was disappointed about was that I thought you'd be able to use it to jump over some attacks whilst using the skill at the same time, because there are a couple jumpable attacks in this fight, but I seem to still get hit no matter what. I think maybe my feet were getting caught. Anyway, after much testing, I ended up abandoning Golden Crux completely during this fight, and only used it against Midra before he went frenzy. Overall, definitely a solid 7 out of 10. Nothing too fancy, but certainly a viable option. Only 4 DLC bosses remain at this point. It could have been 6, but if you think I'm going to do Bale's fight with only Bale's Tyranny, then you're on crack. Also, the Divine Beast with Divine Beast Tornado sounds like a horrific experience. Unlike some Elden Ring YouTubers, I don't really enjoy pain that much. Anyway, let's do some spinning, shall we? Ah yes, the Putrescent Knight. Let's go, baby. Head on over towards my favorite area in the game, the Cerulean Coast. Let me clarify, it's only my favorite because of how it looks. Otherwise, this place is barren as shit. Anyway, we proceed to the ominous yet beautiful cavernous depths below, where we of course die to the aimbot laser beam guys. Seriously, these guys need to chill the fuck out. This is probably the most difficult running section in the game. Don't worry though, I took part in some animal-based therapy to calm me down before taking the leap of faith. And so, the Putrescent's Cleaver. Once again, a very solid weapon that is made awful when it's up against its owner. It can certainly hold its own here, but the Putrescent's Knight is immune to frostbite, so we had none of that going for us. Also, good luck trying to get off spinning guillotine without getting hit. Almost impossible. A good skill, but actually awful in this fight. And yes, I am aware that there are 2 Putrescent spells that I could have used here, but they're honestly so awful even without using them against the boss resistant to them. So that was just a big no-no. I'm sure you can also see by this point which fights I practice the most. I rarely ever come down here, and I definitely do not have this guy down as well as I do some of the other bosses. Overall, an average 6 out of 10 for the Cleaver. Probably would have been lower, but great axes are just an amazing weapon class, so that kinda carried it a little bit. GG Putrescent Knight. With only 3 bosses remaining, I spin that wheel once more and end up with the Scadutree Avatar, a giant sunflower. Nice. This was also the fight I was the most curious about, as I have literally never fought the Scadutree Avatar without a fire-based weapon, because I'm sure you all know it by now, it has a crippling weakness to fire. The Avatar also has a strong resistance to holy damage, meaning that the Shadow Sunflower Blossom was probably going to perform quite poorly in this fight. I could not have been more mistaken. This thing just fucks, oh my goodness. I turned my HUD on for this fight because I actually couldn't believe how much damage I was doing. Bear in mind, this is with 0 buffing whatsoever and only a Scadutree level of around 10 or so. My knowledge of this game is pretty deep, so I thought I had a good idea of how all the fights were gonna go, but this one surprised me the most. A boss who's resistant to this damage type should not be experiencing this level of punishment. I was already enjoying this Shadow Sunflower Blossom after one of my previous videos, but now I think it's becoming one of my favorite weapons. It hits harder than your drunken stepdad and is a criminally underrated weapon. There are of course better weapons for this fight, but the sheer fact that it holds its own so well with the odds stacked against it means it earns itself an easy 8 out of 10 for me. Our second last boss will get the main man, promised Consort Rellana, and his curved greatswords. Quick side note, look what happens when you unlock your camera during this Ina Elam reveal scene. I've never seen this before, and it looks really weird, but I kinda like it. Definitely gonna try this out on some other cutscenes in future. Traveling up Ina Elam is as painful as always. God, I hate this place. Up there, definitely with the aimbot laser beam dudes in the Cerulean Coast. Anyway, we make it to the end to come up against the nerfed final boss. The nerf was really excellent and makes for a much more balanced fight that is still challenging. Unfortunately, I have nothing good to say about the greatswords of Rellana. Dog shit. That's the only way to describe them. The scaling is all funny and it doesn't really make sense to me. And on top of that, the moveset is the standard power stance colossal set, which is kinda boring and they're just so damn slow, oh my god. With a faster weapon, you actually have a lot of damage windows during this fight now after the update. But not with these things, they suck. For some reason, the standard light attacks are slower than the heavies, so I just stuck on to tap heavies for the majority of the fight. The promised Consort skill is the weapon's only saving grace, and it's pretty cool. But just like spinning guillotine, good luck getting the entire skill off, so I just stuck to the first input whenever I could. This was the longest fight by far, so I'm not going to show the whole thing. I probably should have stopped being stubborn and used some buffs here and there, but whatever. Greatswords of Radahn, congratulations on being as bad as the Poleblade of the Bud. 4 out of 10. Dogshit weapons that I'll probably never use ever again. If you've made it this far, make sure to let me know which boss weapon is your favorite in the comments and why it's Rellana's Twin Blades. Also, hit that like button if you've enjoyed the video so far. I make videos like these once every 2 weeks, so you can also hit that subscribe button if you don't want to miss any. With only one boss remaining, there's no need to hit the spin. We saved the worst for last. Who else but Metyr? Remember when I said I'm all about efficiency? Yeah, I completely forgot about Metyr's quest until it was time to fight her. Whoops. I blow on finger number 1, go pick up the Oh Mother emote to grant ourselves access to finger blow number 2. A lot of blowing going on, yeah? Travel back to Count Weirdo and use the secret switch to access the final finger blow. The gazing finger also surprised me at being pretty decent. Kowtower's Resentment doesn't do that much damage, but it absolutely obliterates NPCs, oh my. It knocks them over consistently in a wide AoE. This would probably be a really good weapon for the leather fight, but that's not what we're here for. I'm here to experience a bit of finger-on-finger action, so weapon itself performs really well against Metyr. It does immense stagger damage and can knock her down pretty quickly with some light attacks and charge attacks here and there. Kowtower's Resentment is also a perfect counter to when she releases her miniature fingers, which can otherwise be quite annoying. The problem here is the fight itself, and not the gazing finger. Metyr is one of the worst bosses they've ever made, and I've probably only defeated her around 5 or 6 times compared to the hundreds of Messmer and Rellana fights I've done. Her attacks are just so strange to avoid, and don't even get me started on the laser beam. I slapped the Raptor of the Mist's Ash of War onto a dagger, as it's one of the only ways to avoid the laser beam, just in case. But luckily, on the one that I beat her, I staggered her at the right moments so that she didn't even do the laser beam, thank God. Overall, the gazing finger was doing a lot of damage and whittled her down really quickly, and I'd give it a very solid 8 out of 10. And with that, we come to the end of the video. The only things you need to take away from this is never use the pole blade of the bud against Romina, nor Radahn's curved greatswords against him. Oh, and also the sword lance, gazing finger, and shadow sunflower blossom are all really awesome. Okay, that's all from me. Until next time, guys.